The hall was glowing with golden light, laughter, and the faint scent of roses. Every table shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, and yet I couldn't shake the strange heaviness in my chest. Today was my son's wedding, the day every mother dreams of, but something about the bride's smile didn't reach her eyes. I watched as Daniel stood at the altar, his hands slightly trembling, his jaw tight with nervous pride. He looked so much like his father on our wedding day that it almost hurt to look at him. And then Emily walked in, stunning, graceful, every guest whispering about how beautiful she looked in white. But behind that beauty was something hollow, something cold. As she approached the altar, my heart skipped. I could see her glancing at me, her expression unreadable. In my hand was a small velvet box. Inside lay the heirloom ring, a delicate diamond band passed down through the women in our family for generations. My mother had worn it, her mother before her, and now it was meant for Emily. But when I offered it to her, she hesitated. That hesitation, that fraction of a second, felt like the air had been ripped from the room. The guests shifted, confused smiles flickering. Daniel looked at her, puzzled. "Emily?" he said softly. "It's okay. It's Mom's ring. It's tradition." She stared at me, her face pale, her fingers trembling. "I can't," she whispered. The priest cleared his throat. "Is something wrong, my dear?" "I'm sorry," Emily said, shaking her head slowly. "But I can't wear that ring." Every camera, every eye turned toward me. My fingers tightened around the box as whispers filled the air. That moment should have broken me. But something inside told me this wasn't about jewelry. It was about something deeper, something that had been waiting to come out. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what happened after this moment still chills me to this day. Daniel frowned. "Emily, what are you talking about?" She didn't answer. Her lips moved, but the words barely escaped her throat. "It's cursed." A few people chuckled nervously, assuming it was some kind of joke. But the look in her eyes, wide, terrified, wasn't one of humor. It was real fear. "Emily," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady, "this ring belonged to my mother." "It's a blessing, not a curse." She stepped back, shaking her head violently. No, I saw it. Last night, in my dream. She came to me. The guests began murmuring louder. Daniel's face turned red. "Emily, stop it. Please, you're embarrassing us." But she wouldn't stop. Her voice rose, trembling, desperate. She said the ring took her life. She said not to wear it. My heart sank. The words stabbed through me like ice. My mother had died on her wedding anniversary, clutching that very ring in her hand. No one knew that. Not even Daniel. "Emily," I whispered, barely breathing. "Who told you that?" Her gaze locked onto mine. "Your mother." The room fell dead silent. Every sound vanished. The music, the whispers, the laughter. All that remained was the sound of my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Daniel turned toward me, confused and angry. "Mom, what's she talking about?" "She's never met Grandma." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because at that moment, the air grew colder, and just when I thought the worst was over, Emily dropped to her knees, gasping for breath. "Emily!" Daniel screamed, rushing toward her. She clutched her chest, her fingers twisting as if invisible hands were choking her. I ran forward. But before I could touch her, she looked up. And I swear her eyes weren't hers anymore. Her voice came out in a rasp I recognized from a place long buried. "Why did you keep it?" I froze. That voice wasn't Emily's. It was my mother's. The guests screamed as the lights flickered. The chandeliers swayed. The priest dropped his Bible. The music cut off mid-note. Daniel shook Emily's shoulders, shouting, "Mom, what's happening?" But I couldn't answer, because I had spent 20 years pretending the story about the ring was just a rumor, that it didn't carry the curse of jealousy, betrayal, and death. And now, in front of 100 people, the curse had woken up. I should have destroyed that ring years ago, but I didn't. And now, my son's bride was paying the price. As Emily's breathing slowed, she whispered one last word that sent a shiver down my spine. "Buried." Then her body went limp. The ring fell from her hand and rolled across the marble floor, stopping right in front of my feet. I stared at it, terrified to touch it. because I knew what came next. Screams echoed through the hall as the string quartet dropped their instruments and people rushed from their seats. Daniel was on the floor, cradling Emily's head in his lap, his tuxedo stained with the spilt champagne that had fallen during the chaos. "Somebody call an ambulance," he shouted, his voice cracking. I stood frozen near the altar, the ring still glinting at my feet like a silent accusation. I wanted to bend down and pick it up, but something in my gut whispered, "Don't touch it." The priest knelt beside Daniel, checking Emily's pulse. "She's breathing," he said softly, "but it's shallow." His words should have calmed me, yet every syllable felt like a countdown. As paramedics rushed in through the side door, I finally dared to look at the ring again. It hadn't rolled randomly. It had stopped exactly at the line where the marble changed color, right where my mother's coffin had rested during her funeral service years earlier. That was no coincidence. The ring knew where it belonged. The paramedics lifted Emily onto a stretcher. Her lips were pale, her eyes fluttering open, just long enough to whisper something that chilled me. "She's still here." I followed them to the ambulance, my heels clicking against the stone floor. Outside, the sky had turned gray, though the forecast had promised a clear afternoon. Guests gathered in stunned clusters, whispering theories. Some said she had fainted from nerves, others muttered about possession. Daniel climbed into the ambulance beside her. I hesitated for a moment before joining. As the doors slammed shut, the siren wailed, a sound that always reminded me of funerals. Inside, Emily's heart monitor beeped steadily. Her hand twitched once, then relaxed. Daniel turned to me, his eyes wild. "Mom, what happened in there? What did she mean about Grandma?" I hesitated. For decades, I had kept the story buried. My mother had died wearing that ring. People said she fell down the stairs, but the doctor never explained the strange bruises around her wrist, or why the ring had turned black overnight. I'd told myself it was superstition, metal reacting to the skin. But now, seeing Emily lying there, every old fear clawed its way back. "Daniel," I whispered, "that ring has a history. One I hoped you'd never have to know." He leaned closer, desperate. "Tell me everything." We reached the hospital. Nurses wheeled Emily through a pair of white swinging doors, leaving Daniel and me in the corridor under harsh fluorescent lights. He rubbed his temples, his jaw trembling. "You're saying the ring did this?" "That's insane." "Maybe," I said quietly. "But your grandmother used to say that love given with envy turns gold to poison." He scoffed but didn't reply. When the doctor finally came out an hour later, his face looked strained. "She's stable," he said, "but she's not waking up yet. We're keeping her overnight for observation." Daniel exhaled in relief, his shoulders dropping. "Can we see her?" The doctor nodded and led us into a small private room. Emily lay still, her skin pale against the white sheets. I noticed something glimmering on the bedside table. The ring. Someone must have placed it there after removing it from her hand. I reached out, intending to cover it with a napkin, but as soon as my fingertips brushed the metal, a sharp current ran up my arm. I gasped and pulled back. The ring was warm, too warm. Daniel frowned. "Mom? What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, rubbing my hand. That lie would be the first of many before the night was over. Hours passed. Daniel eventually fell asleep in the chair beside the bed. I stayed awake, staring at the ring glinting under the lamp. Every few minutes, it seemed to pulse, catching the light in a way that looked almost alive. Around midnight, the monitor beside Emily beeped twice in quick succession. Her eyes flew open. "Emily?" I whispered. She turned her head slowly toward me. But the voice that came from her lips wasn't hers. "You shouldn't have brought me back." The air in the room dropped cold. I felt my breath catch as she sat up, her movements jerky, unnatural. The ring on the table spun by itself once, twice, then stopped. I reached for the call button, but Emily, or whatever was inside her, grabbed my wrist with an iron grip. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the monitor's green light. "Do you think you can bury guilt?" she hissed. "It always finds its way home." The voice was my mother's again, only sharper, angry. "Mom?" Daniel stirred, half awake. "Daniel, stay back!" I shouted. Emily's hand tightened painfully around my wrist before releasing it. She slumped back onto the pillow, unconscious. The heart monitor returned to its steady rhythm. Daniel rushed to her side, terrified, while I stood trembling, staring at the ring still pulsing on the table. Somewhere deep inside me, I knew this wasn't about curses or spirits. It was about something I had done, a secret buried years ago under layers of lies and regret. And if the ring had truly come alive again, then it meant my past was coming for me next. Daniel didn't notice the way my hands were trembling as I poured him a cup of coffee in the hospital's waiting room. He was too focused on the closed door where Emily slept. The smell of disinfectant and burnt coffee filled the air. I stared at the ring inside the transparent hospital evidence bag on the table between us. Its surface seemed dull now, as if it had gone to sleep again, but I couldn't stop replaying the moment when Emily's voice turned into my mother's. That tone, that phrasing, I had heard it once before, decades ago, the night before my mother's accident. I looked at my son and wanted to tell him everything, but where would I even start? That the woman he had never met, the grandmother he'd only seen in photos, had once warned me that this ring could destroy love as easily as it bound it? That it had already taken one marriage down before mine? He'd think I was losing my mind. When the doctor walked by, Daniel rushed to him for updates. I took the chance to slip into Emily's room alone. The soft rhythmic beeping filled the silence. She was asleep again, her face calm, but her fingers twitched from time to time as if gripping something invisible. I moved closer and whispered, "What did you mean she's still here?" The lights flickered once, twice. I froze. My reflection in the monitor turned dark for a split second, as if someone else was standing behind me. I turned around sharply. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of machines. That was when I saw the words on the monitor screen flash for a heartbeat before disappearing. I never left. My stomach twisted. I took a step back, clutching the side of the bed. If this was real, if she was trying to speak through Emily, then my secret wasn't buried anymore. It was clawing its way out. Daniel came in and I forced a calm smile. "She'll be okay. The doctor said she just needs rest." He nodded absently and sat beside Emily again, taking her hand. "I don't care about the wedding anymore," he whispered. "I just want her to wake up." I stayed by the window, watching the city lights blur in the rain. In the reflection, the ring shimmered faintly. I could almost hear my mother's voice again, soft, warning, disappointed. "You should have destroyed it when you had the chance." I closed my eyes. The memory came back like lightning, the night of my mother's funeral. The way her body looked untouched, peaceful, except for her right hand, still clenching that same gold band. The priest had tried to remove it, but it wouldn't come off. It had to be buried with her. That was her wish. But later, I couldn't stop myself. I went back alone and dug until my nails bled. I took the ring from her hand, convinced it was my last connection to her. Now I realized it wasn't a connection. It was a chain. Back in the hospital room, Emily stirred suddenly. Her eyes fluttered open, and this time she didn't sound like my mother. She sounded terrified. "Please!" "Make it stop," she gasped. "It's burning." "What's burning, sweetheart?" Daniel asked. "The ring," she whispered. "It's inside me." The monitor beeped faster. She started shaking. I ran for the nurse, but before I reached the door, the sound of shattering glass stopped me. I turned. The evidence bag had burst open. The ring was gone. Daniel yelled, "What's happening to her?" I couldn't answer, because I saw it, through the thin hospital gown, pressed against Emily's skin. Something glowed faintly over her heart. The same shape. The ring. The nurse ran in, screaming for help. Emily convulsed once, then went still. The lights flickered again, and in the reflection of the window, behind me stood my mother, smiling faintly, eyes hollow. I stumbled back, and the reflection vanished. Only my terrified face remained. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed in my car in the hospital parking lot, staring at the rain sliding down the windshield. Daniel was still inside, refusing to leave Emily's side. I knew what I had to do. The only way to end this was to return the ring to where it came from, to the place I had stolen it. But when I got home, there was a single muddy footprint by my front door. And next to it, the ring, shining wet and gold, waiting for me. I froze, too afraid to move. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was cold again now. Lifeless. I whispered to the empty room, "What do you want from me?" A soft voice, almost carried by the wind, answered, "The truth." The clock struck 3 a.m., the same hour my mother had died. I sank to the floor, clutching the ring, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I never meant to take it." And that's when the phone rang. Daniel's number. My heart stopped as I answered. His voice was shaking. "Mom." "She's gone." My breath caught. "Emily?" "No," he said. "Not Emily. The body in her bed, it's not Emily anymore." And before I could ask what he meant, I heard another voice on the line, soft, calm, and familiar. "Don't cry, darling," it said. "You brought me back, just like you promised." I dropped the phone. Daniel's words echoed through the phone, a haunting mix of confusion and terror. "Not Emily anymore." The phrase rang in my ears like a curse. I couldn't move. The air around me felt heavier, as if every breath I took was being borrowed. I grabbed my car keys and ran into the storm. The rain had turned the world silver and black, the headlights slicing through sheets of water. Every red light felt like eternity. When I reached the hospital, Daniel was standing outside, drenched, his face pale and eyes wild. "She's awake," he said. "But Mom, it's not her." I followed him inside, the fluorescent lights flickering like they were afraid too. We reached the room, and there she was, sitting upright in bed, calm, her hair neatly falling over her shoulders. Her eyes found mine instantly, and for a moment, my body forgot how to move. "Hello, sweetheart," she said softly. The voice wasn't Emily's. It was my mother's, the exact tone, the same inflection she used when I scraped my knees as a child. Daniel looked between us, his voice breaking. "Why is she calling you that?" I couldn't answer. I was too busy watching Emily's hands. She was playing with the ring, sliding it up and down her finger, just like my mother used to when she thought. I stepped closer. "Who are you?" She smiled, tilting her head. "You know who I am. You took what was mine. You brought it back." My throat closed. "You're not supposed to be here." Her eyes darkened. "You promised you'd never leave me alone again." Daniel's voice rose behind me. "What's going on? What is she talking about?" The lights flickered violently, and then silence. The machine stopped beeping, the clock stopped ticking. Everything froze except for her. Emily, or whatever was inside her, turned to Daniel, her smile soft but cold. "Do you know what your mother did, Daniel?" She whispered. "She took something from me. Something that should have stayed buried." He looked at me, his confusion morphing into something else, fear. "Mom, what is she saying?" I could barely breathe. "She's lying." But even as I said it, I felt the weight of the truth pressing down. Emily, or my mother through her, laughed softly, the sound low and distant. "Lying? No, darling. You took my ring from the grave. You wore it when your husband left you. You wore it when your son was born. You gave it to the one woman who would bind your bloodline to mine forever." Daniel's jaw dropped. "You took it from Grandma's grave?" Tears blurred my vision. I didn't know. I was young, I thought. I thought it was just a ring. Emily's expression softened, almost pitying. "You thought wrong." Her hand reached toward Daniel, and for a heartbeat the air shimmered. I saw my mother's reflection standing where Emily sat, older, colder, but undeniably her. I grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him back. "Don't touch her!" Her face changed. Anger flashed. "You can't stop what's already begun!" The lights snapped back on, blinding white. Emily collapsed onto the bed, her body convulsing. Nurses rushed in, alarms screamed, and Daniel was pulled away by security when he tried to get closer. I stood frozen as they worked to stabilize her. The ring rolled off her finger, spinning across the floor until it stopped at my feet. It gleamed faintly, wet with blood. I bent down, staring at it. My reflection warped in the gold. For a second I saw not my own face but hers. When I looked up again, Emily was gone. The bed empty. The monitors flatlined. They searched the whole floor, the stairwells, the security tapes. Nothing. She had vanished. Daniel sat in the hallway, his face buried in his hands. I sat beside him, numb. He finally spoke, voice hollow. She was right, wasn't she? "You did something. I couldn't lie anymore. Yes, I took it from her grave. But I didn't know it would do this. I didn't know it would bring her back. He stared at me, silent. Then he stood and walked away. When I got home that night, the house felt wrong, too quiet. I turned on the lights and saw muddy footprints leading from the front door to the living room. A wet trail glistened across the wooden floor, stopping right where I had once hidden my mother's ring box. The box was open. Empty. I called Daniel, but he didn't answer. I called again. Still nothing. I was about to drive to his apartment when I heard the faint sound of humming from the hallway, a song I hadn't heard in years. My mother's lullaby. It was coming from my bedroom. I walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. The door was half open. Inside, a shadow moved, pacing slowly by the window. I pushed the door wider. Emily was standing there, or something that looked like her skin pale as moonlight, her eyes glowing faintly gold, and on her hand, the ring. She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's time to finish what you started." I backed away, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "What do you want?" She stepped closer, her voice calm and soft. "You gave me life again. Now I want yours." The lights flickered once, and then everything went dark. Rain hammered the windows like frantic hands begging to be let in. I fumbled for the light switch, but nothing worked. The entire house was swallowed in darkness. The only glow came from the hallway, where the faint outline of Emily's figure shimmered, her hair damp, her smile unwavering. "Stay away from me," I whispered, backing toward the kitchen. My voice trembled, each word breaking. She tilted her head, studying me like a predator amused by its prey. "You can't hide, Mother. You opened the door yourself." Her tone was soft, eerily calm, but every syllable carried the weight of something ancient, something that shouldn't have existed anymore. The lights flickered once more, briefly illuminating her face. Her eyes weren't hers anymore. They were my mother's. I stumbled backward, my hands shaking as I reached for anything that could protect me. A knife, a chair, something. My fingers brushed the counter edge, slick with condensation. I felt the cold metal of a knife and gripped it tightly, the blade trembling as much as I was. "Emily, listen to me," I said, trying to steady my breath. "You don't have to do this. Please." She took another step forward, her movements unnaturally smooth, like she was gliding rather than walking. "Do what?" she asked in a soft, almost mocking tone. "This isn't me, remember? You made this. You took her place, and now she's taking yours." Her words sliced deeper than any knife could. "You're not my mother," I said, though my voice cracked at the end. Her smile widened. "Aren't I?" For a split second, the kitchen seemed to shift. Old wallpaper appeared where modern paint had been. The clock on the wall changed into the one my mother used to own, the air heavy with the scent of lavender and baking bread. I was standing in my childhood home. "No," I whispered. She walked closer, her eyes burning with something between sadness and fury. "You stole from me," she said. "You stole my rest. My knees weakened." "I didn't know, Mom. I didn't mean to." Liar. The word hit me like a thunderclap. I stumbled back and tripped over a stool, crashing to the floor. The knife slipped from my hand and clattered across the tiles. Emily bent down, her face inches from mine. Her breath was cold. "You could have left me in peace, but you had to touch what wasn't yours. Now the bloodline pays." Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating her pale face, and for a moment, I saw both of them layered together. Emily's soft features twisted with my mother's sharp, familiar lines. Then from behind her, a voice called out, "Mom? But Daniel." He stood at the doorway, his phone light trembling in his hand. When Emily turned to him, I saw his expression falter. Fear, disbelief, heartbreak, all at once. "Daniel, don't come closer," I shouted, but he didn't listen. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Emily, what's going on?" She turned fully now, her tone dropping into something almost tender. "Daniel, sweetheart, you look just like your grandfather." He froze. "What?" Her smile returned, that same haunting curve. "I remember the night he gave me this ring." She lifted her hand, the golden band glinting faintly in the dark. "Do you know what he promised me?" "Eternal love, eternal life." "Stop it," Daniel shouted. "You're not her." Emily, or whatever was inside her, laughed. The sound was brittle, echoing through the walls. "Oh, Daniel, You were always the smart one, but not smart enough. Before I could move, she lunged toward him. Daniel fell back, his flashlight skidding across the floor, the beam bouncing wildly. I scrambled to grab the knife again, my heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else. "Get away from him!" I screamed, swinging blindly. There was a flash, a glint of metal, and then silence. For a long second, I didn't breathe. The only sound was the steady drip of rain from the broken window. Then Emily staggered back, clutching her side. The gold ring slipped off her finger and rolled to the floor, glowing faintly before going still. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Only a faint whisper that sounded like a sigh of relief. Finally! Then she collapsed. Daniel rushed to her side, his hands trembling. "Mom, what did you do?" I stared at the ring, now lying motionless on the floor. Its glow had faded, but the air still felt heavy, like something unseen had just left the room. "I ended it," I said quietly. "She's free now." Daniel looked up at me, his eyes wide. "Who was she?" "My mother," I whispered, "and," for a moment, Emily too. The storm outside began to fade, leaving only the faint patter of rain. Daniel picked up the ring and stared at it. "What do we do with it?" I hesitated. Then I said softly, "We bury it, where it belongs. And this time, we don't look back." He nodded, tears shining in his eyes. That night, we drove to the old cemetery where my mother had been buried decades ago. The earth was still damp from the storm. I knelt beside her grave, the ring cold in my palm. "I'm sorry," I whispered, placing it on the ground. "Rest now." Daniel placed his hand on my shoulder, silent. We stood there until the first light of dawn broke through the trees, casting long golden rays over the headstone. When we turned to leave, I glanced one last time and froze. The ring was gone. The sun had barely risen when Daniel and I returned home. The light poured weakly through the curtains, making the house look both familiar and foreign, like a stranger wearing a loved one's face. The smell of damp earth still clung to our clothes, and every creak of the floorboards felt heavier now, like the house itself was remembering. Daniel went straight to the kitchen, silent, his hands trembling as he poured himself a glass of water. I could see the exhaustion in him, not just from the night, but from the weight of things no one should ever see. "Mom," he said finally, his voice low. "Do you really think it's over?" I stared at the table, where a faint, wet outline of the ring had somehow appeared, a small, perfect circle of moisture that shimmered like breath on glass. I wiped it quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes, it's over." But even as I said it, a coldness spread through me, because I wasn't sure. I went to the living room, picking up the blanket that had fallen during the chaos. Everything looked normal again, too normal. The shattered glass was gone. The wind had stilled, and the walls stood silent, pretending they hadn't witnessed what happened. I sank onto the couch and closed my eyes. But all I could see was Emily's face, and beneath it, my mother's eyes staring back at me. The door creaked softly, and Daniel came in, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to me, then sat across, staring into his. "I keep thinking about what she said," he murmured. "About the bloodline." I swallowed hard. "Don't." He looked up, confusion clouding his tired eyes. "Why not? What if there's something we don't know? Something in our family?" "There isn't," I cut him off. "It ends here, Daniel. Do you understand me?" "It ends." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. But I could tell he didn't believe it. When he left for work that afternoon, I stayed home, trying to distract myself. I cleaned, rearranged furniture, watered the plants, anything to feel in control. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. That night, I sat by the window, staring out into the garden. The earth where we had buried the ring still looked disturbed, like it hadn't settled. The moonlight cast faint silver shadows across it, forming what looked like 2 intertwined shapes, a hand and a circle. I tried to look away, but something about it held me there. And then faintly I heard a sound, a whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, but then I realized it was coming from inside the house. "Juliet." The voice was soft, loving, the way my mother used to say my name when I was little. My blood turned to ice. I stood up, slowly turning toward the hallway. It was empty, Juliet. This time it was closer. The air grew colder, the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. "Please," I whispered into the dark. "What do you want from me?" The answer came like a sigh against my ear. "You promised," I stumbled back, my breath catching. "No, I set you free." A faint chuckle echoed from the walls. "You can't free what was never trapped." The temperature dropped suddenly. My breath became visible, a cloud in the air. I fumbled for the flashlight on the table, but before I could turn it on, something cold brushed past me, like fingertips across my arm. The living room clock began to tick faster. The seconds merged into a continuous hum. I turned toward the fireplace and froze. There, sitting calmly on the mantel, was the ring. It gleamed in the pale moonlight, wet with fresh soil. My knees went weak. I whispered, "No, we buried you." And then, in the reflection of the glass frame behind it, I saw movement, a silhouette standing behind me. A figure with hair too long to be mine, eyes too hollow to be human. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. "Why did you come back?" I whispered. The reflection tilted its head, the same way Emily had. "You opened the door, remember?" Tears welled in my eyes. "What do you want?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, a shape began to appear behind her reflection. Faint golden light, forming into something like handwriting across the glass. It spelled one word: oath. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the rug. The lights flickered back on for a second, and just as suddenly went out again. When they came back for good, the reflection was gone. So was the ring. I stood there for a long time staring at the empty mantel. Then quietly, I sat down and opened my journal. My hands trembled as I wrote the words I had never dared say aloud. "If you ever find this, it means the curse didn't end with me." The next day, Daniel came by. I tried to hide my fear behind routine, cooking breakfast, making small talk, pretending everything was fine. But he noticed. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked gently. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." He looked at me for a long time, then said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should move. Start over." My heart ached. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him everything. But when I opened my mouth, something inside me froze. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded. "Maybe you're right." As he left, I looked at the empty spot on the mantel again. For the first time, I realized the faint outline of the ring was still there. A perfect circle burned into the wood. I touched it lightly, my fingers cold against the surface, and for a moment, just beneath the faint hum of the house, I heard her voice again, distant, almost kind, "Till death do us part." The next morning, I woke up with sunlight streaming through the curtains, warm, golden, gentle. It felt like a lie, the kind of morning that pretends everything is fine when something deep inside you knows it isn't. I moved slowly, each motion deliberate, as though any sudden movement might disturb something fragile in the air. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds outside seemed to avoid my garden now. When I stepped into the living room, my breath caught. The ring was there again, sitting neatly on the coffee table, as if it had always belonged. The same faint shimmer, the same soil-stained surface, the same impossible proof that I wasn't free. I didn't scream. I didn't even gasp. I just stood there, staring, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me until my knees nearly gave out. I whispered, "What do you want from me?" A sound answered, not a voice this time, but music. Faint, distant piano keys playing a tune I hadn't heard in decades. It was the song my mother used to hum while brushing my hair when I was little. My chest tightened. "No, please, not again." The melody grew louder, clearer, echoing through the hall. It came from my mother's old bedroom, a room that had been locked since she died. Every part of me screamed not to go. But my feet moved on their own, carrying me down the hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, the sound sharp in the silence. When I reached the door, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the knob. "Don't open it," a voice in my head whispered. Daniel's voice, or maybe my own. But I turned it anyway. The door opened with a slow groan. The air inside was cold, heavy with the scent of old perfume and dust. The piano music stopped instantly. For a moment there was only silence. Then I saw it. The mirror. It stood in the corner, covered with a sheet. The same mirror my mother used to sit before for hours, brushing her hair, whispering things I could never quite hear. I had covered it years ago, too afraid to face it. But now the sheet moved, just slightly, as if something beneath it had breathed. I gripped the fabric, my hands trembling, and pulled it off. The reflection that stared back wasn't mine. It was my mother's. Her face was pale but perfect. Her eyes full of something I couldn't name. Sadness, power, love, maybe all at once. Mom. My voice cracked. She smiled faintly. You kept the promise. Tears filled my eyes. What promise? What are you talking about? Her reflection tilted her head. To guard the bloodline. To bear the burden. You did well, Juliet. I don't understand. I cried. What bloodline? Why are you doing this to me? Her reflection's eyes darkened. You were never supposed to open the door. You were supposed to forget. Forget what? She didn't answer. The mirror surface rippled, and suddenly, it wasn't my mother anymore. It was Emily. Standing in her wedding dress, holding the ring. Her eyes locked onto mine, shimmering with something like pity. We all made the same mistake. We thought love could save us. The floorboards groaned, the mirror shuddered, and then her hand reached out, pressing flat against the glass from the inside. I stumbled back. Stop, please, stop! You can't run, she whispered. You're part of this now. The glass cracked in the shape of a circle, the same size as the ring. The lights flickered again. The house moaned like a living thing, walls trembling, pictures falling. I clutched the doorframe, watching in horror as the reflection began to bleed light. Golden, pulsing, alive. Then it was gone. The mirror stood empty, showing only my pale, terrified face. I backed away and ran from the room, slamming the door behind me. My heart hammered in my chest as I stumbled into the kitchen, gasping for breath. The phone rang, sharp and sudden, cutting through the silence. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Mom? It was Daniel's voice. I nearly collapsed in relief. Daniel, thank God, please come home. Something's wrong with the house. What do you mean? He asked, concern tightening his tone. There's something here. I saw Mom and Emily. He was silent for a few seconds. Then, softly, he said, Mom, you're scaring me. I'm serious, Daniel. Please, just come. I will. But Mom. His voice dropped lower, almost hesitant. Don't go near the mirror. I froze. How did you know about the mirror? He didn't answer right away. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, Because I saw her too. The line went dead. I stood there in stunned silence, the phone still in my hand, cold against my ear. Outside, the sky darkened again, clouds gathering like bruises. The wind picked up, howling through the garden. I turned toward the living room, and the ring was gone. In its place, on the coffee table, was a small folded piece of paper. My fingers shook as I opened it. It read, Till death do us part. Bring it home. My eyes widened as I looked toward the hallway leading back to my mother's room. The door was now slightly open. The same faint piano tune began to play again. My heart pounded in my chest as I whispered, Not this time. I grabbed my coat, the keys, and the small shovel I had used before. I didn't know what I was going to do, only that I couldn't stay. As I stepped outside, rain began to fall again, soft but relentless, washing over the earth where we had buried the ring. The soil looked disturbed once more, as if something had crawled out. I dropped to my knees, digging frantically through the mud until I found it, the ring, glimmering faintly beneath the surface. Fine, I whispered, clutching it tight. You want to come home? Let's go. I drove straight to the old family church at the edge of town, the same one where I was married, where my mother was buried, where everything had begun. When I walked inside, the air felt colder than ever. The candles flickered even though there was no wind. I walked to the altar, my footsteps echoing like heartbeats. I placed the ring on the stone and whispered, It ends here. The church trembled faintly, a low rumble like thunder beneath the ground. Then, silence. The ring stayed still. I waited for a sign, a sound, anything. But nothing happened, just silence. I took a deep breath, finally letting myself believe it was over. But as I turned to leave, I heard the faintest whisper, distant but unmistakable. "Thank you." "Juliet." The voice was calm, almost peaceful, and when I glanced back, the ring was gone. Only a faint circle of light remained on the altar, glowing softly, like a heartbeat fading into stillness. For 2 days after that night, the house stayed quiet. Too quiet. No more piano music, no whispering voices, no flickering lights. For the first time in months, I slept. Deep, dreamless, heavy sleep. When I woke up, I made coffee and stood by the window. The rain had stopped. The garden looked fresh, washed clean, sunlight glinting on the wet leaves. It felt peaceful. I wanted to believe it was finally over. Then Daniel came home. He stood at the doorway, shoulders tense, dark circles under his eyes. I rushed to hug him, but he didn't move. He just stood there staring at me. "Mom," he said quietly. "I went to the cemetery." My stomach dropped. "Why?" He swallowed hard. "Because I had to see it for myself. Emily's grave. It's empty." I froze. The world around me seemed to tilt. "That's not possible," I whispered. He looked at me, pain flashing in his eyes. "There's no coffin, Mom. The ground was disturbed. Someone or something dug it up." I sank into the nearest chair, my hands shaking. "She's gone," I murmured. I thought I ended it. Daniel sat across from me, his face pale. "You didn't. Whatever this is, it's not over." We sat in silence, the clock ticking loudly on the wall. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, we both heard it. A faint thud. Daniel stood up immediately. "What was that?" I shook my head. "I don't know." He grabbed the old flashlight from the kitchen drawer and motioned for me to stay behind him. We followed the sound, each creak of the floorboards making my pulse race faster. It came from the basement door, the one that hadn't been opened in years. The air grew colder with every step. Daniel gripped the handle, looked at me once, then opened it. The hinges screamed in protest. A smell hit us instantly. Damp earth, mold, and something faintly metallic. We descended slowly, our feet crunching on the old wooden steps. When the flashlight beam swept across the basement floor, I saw it. A trail of muddy footprints leading from the window to the old chest in the corner. The same chest my mother had kept locked all her life. Daniel moved closer, crouched, and brushed the dirt away from the lid. "It's open," he said. Inside lay the wedding ring, gleaming faintly, perfectly clean, as if it had never touched soil. I felt cold all over. "Daniel, step back," but he didn't listen. He reached down, curiosity overtaking fear. The moment his fingers brushed the metal, the flashlight flickered. The air pulsed. Then a woman's voice filled the room, soft, echoing, mournful. "You brought it home." I stumbled back, clutching my chest. "Emily?" The ring glowed brighter, the light spilling out in golden waves until it filled the basement like liquid fire. Daniel dropped it instantly, shaking his hand as if burned. A shadow began to form in the light, not solid, not quite human. Emily's face appeared first, her eyes dark and endless, her mouth trembling. "You freed me," she whispered, "but the debt remains." "What debt?" I shouted. "What do you want from us?" Her gaze turned toward Daniel. "The bloodline must balance. One must stay, one must go." Daniel stepped in front of me. "No, whatever this is, take me instead." "Daniel, no!" I grabbed his arm, but the light surged, forcing me to cover my eyes. When I opened them again, Emily was gone and Daniel was on the floor, unconscious. I screamed his name, shaking him, but he didn't respond. The ring lay beside him, pulsing faintly. "Please," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "Not my son. Take me, take me." The basement trembled, dust raining down from the ceiling. A voice answered from nowhere and everywhere at once. The choice was already made. The light flickered, then vanished completely. The ring stopped glowing. Silence fell. I dragged Daniel upstairs, praying, crying, calling his name. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, he gasped, eyes flying open. He looked at me blankly. "Mom?" I sobbed and held him tight. "You're okay. You're okay." He frowned, touching his temple. "What happened?" I didn't answer. I didn't want him to remember. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Daniel rested on the couch, pale but alive. I cleaned the mud-stained floors, trying to pretend life could go back to normal. But that night, when I went to check on him, I froze. He was sitting on the couch, staring at something in his hand. "The ring, Daniel," I whispered, my throat tightening. "Where did you get that?" He smiled faintly, the same way Julian used to. "It was always mine, Mom." Then he looked up, and for a moment, his eyes weren't his. They were Emily's. The light flickered. The house groaned. And I finally understood the debt had never been paid. I couldn't breathe. My son's smile, that faint, crooked half-smile, was identical to the one Emily used to give when she wanted to hide a secret. For a second I thought I was imagining it, that trauma was twisting my sight. But then he spoke again, calm and almost tender. "Don't look at me like that, Mom. I'm still here. Mostly." My throat went dry. "What do you mean, mostly?" He tilted his head, studying the ring between his fingers. "She doesn't want to hurt us. She just wants to be remembered." That's all she ever wanted, the way he said she made my skin crawl. "Daniel, put that ring down." He laughed softly, a laugh that wasn't his. "You sound just like him, like Dad." A chill sliced through me. "What do you mean?" "You never told me the truth about that night," he said. "The storm, the accident. You said he slipped and fell, but he didn't, did he?" I backed away. "Daniel, you need to rest." He slammed the ring onto the table. The house shook. The lights blinked. "He tried to leave her, didn't he?" I shook my head, tears spilling. "No." "Daniel, please." But he was already standing, breathing hard, his voice lower now, not entirely his. He promised Emily forever. He broke it. Someone always pays when a promise breaks. The room grew colder. The smell of rain filled the air again. "Daniel, fight it," I begged. "It's not you." "She's trying to use you." He looked at me, eyes glassy. "Maybe she just wants justice." Suddenly the front door burst open, wind whipping through the hallway. The photo frames crashed from the walls, scattering glass like tiny mirrors. I saw reflections everywhere, of Emily's face, of Julian's, of my own. I grabbed the ring and hurled it into the fire. "Enough! You can't have him!" For a moment nothing happened. Then a scream tore through the house, not of pain, but of release. The flames turned white, rising high before collapsing into embers. Daniel dropped to his knees, gasping, eyes wide with terror. "Mom, what happened?" I ran to him, holding his face in my hands. "You're here. You're mine. It's over." He looked at the fireplace, where the ring had melted into a dull puddle of silver. "It's really gone?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure. "It has to be." We stayed like that for a long time, the smell of smoke heavy around us, the quiet hum of the night slowly returning. Weeks passed. The house stayed calm. Daniel went back to work, and I tried to rebuild the routine of life, morning coffee, evening walks, silence that didn't feel haunted. Sometimes, though, I'd catch him staring into nothing, a faraway look in his eyes. One evening I asked, "You okay, sweetheart?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, just tired." He kissed my forehead and went to bed. I sat by the window, listening to the crickets, trying to convince myself everything was normal. That's when I heard it, the piano. One single note, soft, deliberate. Then another. I stood frozen, heart pounding. Slowly I turned toward the living room. The old piano was bathed in moonlight, its lid closed, untouched. But there, on the keys, lay a perfect silver circle, melted and reformed. The ring, and beside it, in looping, elegant handwriting on a torn scrap of paper, were 4 words. Forever means forever. Juliet. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of laughter. Gentle, distant, familiar. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear, only a strange, quiet understanding. Because sometimes love doesn't die. It just changes shape.